So have you ever been fed up with life and so you look for an outlet, right? Now, this isn't just me, right? I know everybody tries to improve their life some way, shape, or form, right? But I'm talking about way back before Google and YouTube and all that stuff, right? Before you could easily have access to all this stuff, you still had to go look in a book or go to college to essentially learn anything, right? Or find someone that would essentially teach you, right? And so ultimately, I myself, right, have always tried to improve myself health-wise. You know, I've gone through different phases in my life where I went extremely hard on the health aspect of personal development, and I've gotten there. I've reached goals that I've always wanted to achieve, and I've gotten out of those goals that I've wanted to achieve, and many different things, right, when it comes to physical development. But now when I'm going into personal development, my first thoughts of that, right, was I thought it was really hokey. And a lot of people I surrounded myself with thought the same thing. And it was hard because, you know, later on, it's been only a couple years since I've been in personal development, okay? And since I've really taken a liking to it and really enjoyed it and really immersed myself in it, but to get to that point, right, I just got out of college, and, you know, after all the traditional ways of learning and teaching yourself, you know, I just got out of college and I started my programming job, and nonetheless I was trying to look for different ways, right, because my first programming job I had to essentially commute 1 hour both ways, right, to my workplace. And so the biggest thing was, you know, I wanted to find some way I could utilize that time, right, the 2 hours I was spending every day trying to, you know, learn and not just sit on the road and listen to the radio and all that stuff. I wanted to utilize that time, right, because my time was very limited, right, because I also had a family at that time, so it was just trying to get all that stuff, you know, working correctly for me. And so nonetheless, I came across this guy. His name is John Samez, and he used to do a lot of programming stuff, right? And so I picked up his book, and it was about soft skills. And in going through that book, right, it really taught me, he, you know, touched upon a lot of different things, right, about, you know, personal development. And more than just the fact of, you know, doing what I was doing, you know, learning programming or learning any kind of, you know, physical things, but more into finance and making, you know, challenging yourself, making yourself a better person ultimately, right? And so that essentially kicked off my personal development, you know, experience, right, is by reading that book. It was a very good book that directed me in a way that I really needed, especially at a time like that in my life, because I was in my, you know, early 30s. I wasn't really sure what I wanted in life. I was going through a lot of tough things in my life. And so I started really immersing myself in personal development. And, you know, for the longest time, I've always thought personal development was always extremely hokey, right? And I know a lot of people, again, I surrounded myself with, thought the same thing. And I was going to immerse myself, right? I started getting addicted. I remember one of the first books I've ever read in personal development, aside from that one, was, you know, the 7 highly effective, you know, habits of successful people. And that book in itself, you know, it changed my perspective on a lot of different things, right? It taught me all these different terms, right, about reframing and meditation and essentially, you know, relooking at things, right? And at the time, you know, I always thought I was open-minded, but reading this book, it really was eye-opening for me, right? And I think that's the best thing about personal development, is that it gives you new perspectives. It gives you techniques to not only deal with life, but to make yourself a better person, right? To interact with the world a lot better. And I think that's ultimately what, you know, personal development's about, is, you know, allowing yourself to, you know, deal with everyday life, whether, you know, because we're emotional creatures, right? And we deal with relationships and, you know, stresses and a bunch of different things in life that, you know, a lot of these things can control you and direct your life in a way that you may not want it to go, right? And for myself, I've always been the kind of person that didn't believe in taking medications, right, or anything like that. Now, I know this seems off topic, but just stay with me for a second. But I was never that kind of person, right? I've always wanted to find ways to fix it naturally, right? That's just the way I've always been. I don't like the kind of person that likes to rely on anything. I want to be able to do it myself or find a way to do it, right? If there's any possible way I can do it. And so the biggest thing being is that I started doing this, right? I started getting into personal development, and then it was one book, and then I was like, wow, I have learned so much from this book, right? And then I started looking up what's the next book, and then I read that book on Dale Carnegie on how to win friends and influence people, and I was like, man, this book is just like mind-blowing, right? So I Googled, like the top 10 personal development books, and it's, Dale Carnegie and Napoleon Hill and, David Covey, all these other different authors, right? These old authors, and they have some phenomenal insight, right? Like back when personal development came out, like those were the books that set the par, right, for all other personal development books. And so this was like the biggest thing for me, was to continue to do this, was starting to get, take control of my life and take control of those things that I wanted better control over, because we ultimately only have control over those things in which the way we react with the world, right? And these books really teach you to deal with a lot of that stuff. Now, I know a lot of people, they think, like myself for a little while, about how personal development is really hokey. And it may seem that way, but a lot of these things, if you're implementing them on a daily basis, they really do help, right? It's making the little changes every single day and doing it every single day. It's just like working out, right? You do it every single day. You're not going to see the changes in a week. You're not going to see the changes in a month, But you do it after a long period of time, you start seeing some really dramatic results. And it's not just physical, right? I'm talking about mentally and putting yourself in a state in which you can deal with the stresses of life, deal with, relationships and all these things that are valuable to everybody, right? And, you may not be happy, you may be happy, you may be satisfied, you may not be satisfied. There's tons of personal development books that can really teach you a lot. And pushing yourself to go further than that is ultimately, I think, where you want to be, right? And ever since then, right now, my journey started probably like 4 or 5 years ago, doing a lot of personal development stuff. And I have thoroughly enjoyed it, right? I have always looked for the next greatest book. Although now I'm a lot more pickier because I've read a ton of books, right? The first 3 years, I think I was reading over like 65 books a year, are doing them on Audible, right? And reading them. Some of them I've actually read. And so it's just going through that, right? Going through all these different things and seeing what I can learn and applying these things, right? It's not just learning about it, but applying them and seeing what they work. And like, I've tried this and that was garbage and that was actually really good, and so I've actually implemented it, and it's been a habit that I've developed, right? And so ultimately, do I still do a lot? Do I still read a lot? Yes, I still read a lot of these self-development books, but mostly I make sure that it's something I'm interested in, right? Before I was just, learning about the habits and all that stuff. Yes, I realized that, having specific habits and doing routines and stuff I was already used to. Those are things that I implemented in my life without having to read all these personal development books. But there was a lot of tips and tricks in there that help you and give you, they reframe everything, right? To help you understand the way things are working and the way your mind works. And I've been a big component of that as well, as learning about how the mind works and essentially tricking myself into believing things that, may not be true. I may be telling myself lies, but if you believe that, you tell yourselves a lot of lies anyway about how you can't. When instead, if you could actually just tell yourself that you can, that can dramatically change, the way you look at life. And to think that you're being possibly held down, right? or you can't get anywhere, or you think that you're not going to be able to do anything because, because of whatever situation that you're in. Now, I was in some pretty bad situations, right, in my life. And, I was 18, I was living with my aunt, and, there was some hard times where I had absolutely nothing but a couple $100 in my bank account, and that was it. And I still had to get to work. I walked to work an hour each way. I mean, I wish I could say I was joking, but this is really the way it was. And I didn't know what I was gonna do. I mean, luckily I ended up moving to my father's, and I got that job at the factory. But, I still wasn't satisfied, because I moved out there because I thought it would improve my life, and it didn't. And so I had to find a different way. I had to find an alternate way. And so ultimately, and that's what it's about, is to continue to push yourself no matter what. And personal development has really helped me in my life in doing that, and seeing what's out there, right? And remolding my mind, right? And that's ultimately what it is, because knowledge is power, right? There's a reason people say that, but you also have to apply that knowledge. You can't just, absorb all that stuff and then just sit on it. I have learned a lot, and I apply everything I learned, and those things that really work, they stick. There's a lot of things that don't work as well, and they obviously don't stick. But nonetheless, I think personal development is great for everybody, and something you should do, right, and strive. And a lot of people say it takes them out of who they are, but a lot of times it just changes your normal actions, right? Because your normal routine, right? We're born to be lazy, right? To be protected, to protect ourselves, and the best way we can do that is by essentially not doing anything, right? Our body is essentially programmed to do that, to sit on the couch and be safe. That's what we are naturally programmed to do. And it takes effort and action to do those things that are going to get you those other things that you want in life. And so ultimately, that's just the biggest thing. I have been trying my best to learn and grow it every year, right? To be better than last year. And that's the best way to look at it, to only compare yourself to yourself and see how far you've come. And that's what I've learned through personal development. That's what I get out of personal development. A lot of stuff is repetitive, but it's reiterated to you, right? And that helps. It helps you, motivate yourself. That helps you find new outlets, because that one book, 95% of it might be repetitive, but that other 5%, it might teach you something that can change your life. So I hope this video helps you guys. And until next time, I will see you guys later.